What transforms an adventure of a lifetime into an everlasting nightmare? When does a remote highway become the stage for a crime that defies explanation? In the heart of Australia's vast desert, along a desolate stretch of asphalt cutting through endless wilderness, two young travelers encountered something that would change everything. One disappeared without a trace into the darkness. The other emerged from the shadows, bearing witness to events that would captivate the world. Welcome to True Crime Stories Worldwide. Stay with us until the end as we unravel a mystery that continues to haunt investigators to this day. The year was 2001. 28-year-old Peter Falconio and his 27-year-old girlfriend Joanne Lees had left their lives in Britain behind, driven by youthful enthusiasm and the promise of unforgettable experiences. Their dream was simple: explore the world together, creating memories that would last forever. After traveling through various Asian destinations, they arrived on Australian shores with working holiday visas in hand. In Australia, they purchased a small orange combi van that would serve as both transportation and home during their continental crossing. This vehicle would carry them across one of Earth's most unforgiving landscapes, a terrain where civilization gives way to overwhelming emptiness, where help can be hours or even days away. On July 2nd, the couple reached Alice Springs, the geographical center of the Australian continent. This remote town sits where modernity meets the harsh reality of the surrounding wilderness. From there, they contacted their families back in Britain, assuring everyone that their adventure was proceeding exactly as planned. No one could have imagined those phone calls would be the last time Peter's father would hear his son's voice. 12 days later, on the evening of July 14th, Peter and Joanne decided to continue their journey northward. Their destination was Darwin, accessible via the Stuart Highway, a ribbon of roads stretching endlessly through the continent's interior. They stopped at the Tea Tree Roadhouse to refuel before pressing onward past Barrow Creek. As darkness descended upon the desert, isolation became their only companion. The highway stretched ahead, unmarked by streetlights, swallowed by an ocean of darkness. In those lonely hours, headlights appeared behind them, a four-wheel drive vehicle that maintained an unnervingly close distance without attempting to pass. Peter grew increasingly concerned as the white vehicle drew alongside their van. The driver gestured frantically, indicating that sparks were flying from their exhaust system. Believing it to be a mechanical issue requiring immediate attention, Peter pulled onto the roadside. He instructed Joanne to move into the driver's seat and prepare to rev the engine while he inspected the rear of their vehicle. What happened next occurred in mere seconds, but would echo through decades. A sharp sound, like an impact or brief explosion, shattered the desert silence. When Joanne turned, she found herself staring directly down the barrel of a gun pointed through her window. Before she could react, the stranger was upon her, binding her wrists behind her back with plastic cable ties and tape. She fought desperately, attempting to kick him away as he worked to restrain her ankles, but he overpowered her and dragged her from the van. Peter had vanished from sight. Joanne neither saw his body nor heard his voice. Only the sounds of movement and dragging in the darkness suggested his fate, filling her with overwhelming terror. The attacker forced Joanne toward his vehicle, accompanied by a dog that added to the nightmarish atmosphere. He shoved her roughly into the back seat, his grip unrelenting. In those desperate moments, Joanne realized she might be living her final hours. The uncertainty of Peter's fate haunted her, even as she confronted her own mortality. But survival instinct proved stronger than fear. When her captor momentarily left the vehicle, Joanne seized the opportunity. She partially freed herself from the restraints and burst into the darkness, running blindly through the dense scrub of the endless desert. She could see nothing except what his vehicle's lights revealed as he pursued her. His flashlight beam swept in every direction while his footsteps drew closer, the dog's barking adding to the terror. Yet she found a low shrub and pressed herself beneath it, remaining absolutely motionless despite her labored breathing and pounding heart. For hours, she remained hidden among the barren vegetation while her attacker searched. He passed near her location multiple times. The flashlight beam nearly illuminated her face, but somehow, through luck or providence, he failed to discover her. Even the dog seemed uninterested in her presence. Eventually, the area fell silent. She heard his vehicle's engine start and fade into the distance, leaving behind an oppressive quiet. As dawn approached, Joanne remained frozen from cold and fear, barely daring to move. When she finally heard the rumble of an approaching train road, a massive 60-meter truck, she forced herself from her hiding place and ran into the middle of the highway. The truck driver nearly struck her before stopping. He found a collapsed woman with bound wrists and eyes overflowing with terror. Between gasping breaths, she told him what had transpired. He drove her to the nearest station at Barrow Creek, where the alarm was raised, initiating the largest manhunt in Northern Territory history. The first hour after Joanne's arrival at Barrow Creek marked the true beginning of a case that would generate endless controversy. While station owners and drivers who rescued her provided comfort, local police in Alice Springs were contacted, dispatching emergency units to the location. Around 3 a.m., the first officers arrived with strict instructions: locate Peter Falconio immediately and apprehend the unknown attacker still at large. But what they discovered along the highway proved puzzling from the very first moment. Near the scene, they found a large pool of blood that appeared to be deliberately covered with dirt. Initial analysis indicated the quantity was inconsistent with a superficial injury, more consistent with fatal hemorrhaging. Yet, Peter's body was nowhere to be found. No remains, no weapon, nothing. Adding to the mystery, the combi van wasn't at the stopping location. Instead, it had been pushed backwards into the bush approximately 80 meters off the road, as if someone wanted to conceal it from passing motorists. Within 24 hours, more than 100 police officers, volunteers, and helicopters were deployed across the region between Alice Springs and Darwin. Roadblocks were established on routes leading both north and south. However, these barriers weren't set up until 8 hours after the attack, giving the perpetrator a significant head start to escape through pathways known only to those experienced in desert navigation. Amidst this chaos, police had to rely primarily on Joanne Lee's testimony, the sole witness and only survivor. She described her attacker as a tall white man driving a four-wheel drive vehicle with a green canopy. She also mentioned a dog in the vehicle. Some investigators couldn't hide their skepticism. The story seemed to contain numerous gaps. She hadn't heard gunfire. She hadn't seen Peter's body. She couldn't precisely determine the perpetrator's features. The media, meanwhile, didn't allow the incident's details to pass quietly. From day one, British and Australian press descended upon the area until the small town streets were overwhelmed with cameras and reporters. Every television channel sought answers to the same question: where did Peter Falconio disappear, and could Joanne have exaggerated or erred in her account? Under mounting pressure, police released a composite sketch of the attacker based on Joanne's description, along with images of his suspected vehicle. However, one officer later remarked that this description could fit half the men in Alice Springs, where white four-wheel drives were extremely common. Days later, tangible evidence emerged. Security camera footage from an Alice Springs fuel station showed a vehicle matching Joanne's description on the same night. Unfortunately, the investigation stalled again when police sent the recording to laboratories for quality enhancement rather than immediately releasing the images to the public, sparking widespread controversy about case mismanagement and lost golden opportunities. Meanwhile, forensic experts worked to collect every possible trace of evidence. They took samples from the combi van's steering wheel and gear shift, theorizing the attacker had driven the vehicle himself to move it into the bush. They also examined the plastic ties found on Joanne's wrists, discovering traces of cosmetics she had used attempting to slip free from the restraints. Under layers of tape, technicians found minute DNA samples belonging to an unknown male. As weeks passed, suspicion began to circle back towards Joanne. She initially refused to provide detailed statements and declined to speak to the press, maintaining silence that some interpreted as evidence of inconsistencies in her story. Certain British newspapers even rudely suggested the possibility of her involvement. 11 days after the incident, Joanne finally appeared at a hastily arranged press conference. She spoke a single sentence directed at her attacker: "If I could ask for one thing, I would ask him to tell us where Peter is." She added nothing more, igniting a fresh wave of controversy between those who saw her as a resilient victim and those who accused her of obscurity and concealment. Thus, between media chaos, weak early procedures, and contradictions in the sole testimony, the case seemed headed towards a dead end. But a new thread was emerging on the horizon. DNA evidence would prove to be the strongest card, one that would completely reverse the investigation's trajectory and place one man at the storm's center. By late 2001, Australian police focused on decisive evidence, DNA found on tape and in the victim's vehicle. Authorities enlisted British experts using advanced DNA technology, strengthening the evidence's power. However, controversy arose over possible sample contamination after genetic traces of a laboratory official appeared, raising defense doubts. Nevertheless, DNA matching with one suspect remained difficult to deny. That suspect was Bradley John Murdoch, a 40-something tall man known for his criminal record involving drug trafficking and traveling vast distances across the desert, which raised further suspicion. Notably, just weeks after the incident, Murdoch dramatically altered his appearance and modified his four-wheel drive vehicle, as if trying to erase any evidence linking him to the crime. His name quickly rose to the top of the suspect list, especially after reconstruction of the journey's route proved that the distance he claimed impossible could be covered in the same time frame with the same vehicle. In August 2002, while Murdoch faced separate charges in South Australia related to assault on a mother and daughter, Northern Territory Police awaited the appropriate moment. As soon as he was acquitted in that case due to insufficient evidence, Northern Territory officers burst into the courtroom and arrested him before media cameras. There was no escape. He was extradited to Darwin to face charges related to Peter Falconio's disappearance. As preliminary hearings began, the defense focused on early investigation errors, poor coordination, delayed security checkpoints, and failure to promptly utilize local trackers. However, these observations didn't diminish the evidence's strength, as British experts confirmed that DNA on Joanne's restraints and in the vehicle definitively belonged to Murdoch. The court also heard testimony from his former associate. Despite controversy about his motives, his statements supported the prosecution's position. In May 2004, Joanne returned to Australia after 3 years to face Murdoch directly, confirming consistent details that his voice and appearance were the same she encountered on the night of the crime. In October 2005, after a trial lasting 9 weeks, the courtroom filled with journalists and those interested in the case. Over 200 pieces of evidence were presented to the jury, and they heard from 80 witnesses. When Murdoch's turn came, he took the witness stand attempting to deny everything attributed to him, describing himself as the victim of a conspiracy aimed at pinning the charge on him. But the prosecutor confronted him with a direct question: "Where did you bury Peter Falconio?" A question for which he found no convincing answer. He appeared flustered momentarily before repeating his denial. After intensive deliberations, the jury emerged with a unanimous verdict: guilty of murdering Peter Falconio and guilty of assault and kidnapping against Joanne Leese. The sentence was life imprisonment with a minimum non-parole period of 28 years. Yet, mystery remains. Peter's body has never been found. No precise details about his fate that night have been revealed. The Falconio family expressed relief at the verdict, but confirmed their pain would persist as long as their son remained missing. As for Murdoch, he continues to this day, insisting on his innocence from inside his cell at Darwin Prison. Thus, the curtain fell on one of the most provocative cases in modern Australian history, but it remained open in public memory: a crime without a corpse, a victim who vanished into the desert, leaving no closure, and a survivor carrying indelible testimony. Among the folds of this story, one question keeps echoing: what really happened to Peter Falconio on that dark night in July 2001, and why was he killed? This has been True Crime Stories Worldwide. Share your thoughts in the comments below. What do you believe truly occurred on that isolated stretch of the Stuart Highway? Until next time, stay safe and stay curious.